How much of your time is spent dealing with your church's finances instead of doing the ministry work you love?
Hey everyone, I'm Dan,
And I'm Kira.
and we're your hosts of Distilled Church Finance Made Simple. Today, we're going to be talking about less math, more ministry, and how to actually understand your church finances. Kira, before we jump in, though, I've got a question for you. Would
Okay.
you rather spend the day only being able to communicate miming or in emojis?
Oh, geez.
Emojis. Okay.
Yeah.
How
Because I
come?
think with miming, my physical movements could limit me. Whereas emojis, I feel like I could use some pretty out there emojis to communicate some pretty complex things.
I mean, I've heard it said that there is a psalm for every sigh of the heart. And I think that's also pretty close to it with emojis. There's so many emojis now that, yeah.
There's
But
an
yeah,
emoji
so let's
for every sigh of the heart.
exactly. Less math, more ministry. And we're going to dive in. We're actually going to spend 2 episodes on this. And so this first one, we're going to talk a little more high level. And then next episode, we're going to dive into some tools for it. But Kira, yeah, get us started. When we say less math, more ministry, just what are we talking about? What do we mean?
Yeah. So less math. That means better, more streamlined systems and support. So one of the phrases that we love to use at Parable is, two eyes on every bill, those kinds of things that are allowing you to take your focus off of the math piece of making sure you know every tiny bit about your finances and really focus on the ministry piece. We always say that pastors don't get into ministry to do math, right? They get into ministry to do ministry. They want to shepherd their people. And so you're able to do more ministry when your finances are streamlined and supported, and it allows you to do what you're called to do, which is shepherd your people and impact the community.
Oh, that's so good. And it ties in with every dollar on mission, right? Like how do those things tie together?
Yeah, I think that phrase, every dollar on mission, is probably one of our favorites, right, Dan? Like we like to say it all the time. I know that I do. And it means that in order to do less math and have more ministry, every dollar that comes into your church has to be aligned with the church's mission. Because if it's not, then you're not able to do more ministry. You're just stuck trying to finagle the numbers.
Yeah. Now we go to conferences, we have pastors reach out to us about our services. So we talk to a lot of pastors, and it's common what you said. They come in, they feel like, hey, I didn't get into this to do all this business side, but I have to do it. And it's keeping me from doing ministry. And one pastor joked at a conference, which was funny but sad. He's like, I almost need to quit ministry or quit my job at the church so I can do ministry. And it's like,
Oh,
man. And so it's like heartbreaking, it's ironic in that, and but like, it's just super heartbreaking. And, but with that, that's the whole thing is the math, the money is meant to help the church and to fuel what God's calling the church to do, not to be a burden to ministry. So we just want to talk a little bit about how do we do that? How do we get to less math so that we can fuel more ministry?
yeah. Dan, I would love to hear from you, from your experience working with churches and even your experience as an XP before. Where do pastors struggle most when it comes to finances? Is it a money problem or is it something deeper?
It's interesting because it often presents itself as a money problem. It feels like, okay, we're not going to make budget. We need to build a new building. We need to hire someone. And so we don't have the funds for it. And so now it's like this money issue. But the reality is a lot of time it stems from not actually understanding their finances, not having good systems in place. And so there's a lot of times when I look at church finances and I'm like, you could afford this, but you don't know that, or your money's going towards things that maybe aren't as good. And if you understood the finances, you had that, you actually would be able to fund what you're talking about. And so there's like this confusion. Again, either they're raised in the church or they go to seminary and they learn ministry. And now all of a sudden, all this business stuff comes and it takes them away from that. And so part of that is, I mean, why companies like Parable even exist is because we're passionate about saying, no, go do what you're passionate about in your ministry and do what God's called you to, and allow organizations like us to have people who are like, but we love being in the back room doing all the numbers and making sure you have that clarity.
That's so good. And it makes me think of a phrase that you often say, which is good is the enemy of great.
Yeah.
And so, kind of with that, my next question is, how can pastors get out of the weeds of the bookkeeping and rise up to, I guess, what would be a CFO level, that kind of oversight, not picking through numbers and receipts, but really high level understanding of their finances.
Right. So one of the challenges is when it's like anything, once you're in the weeds of it, sometimes you just miss kind of the obvious stuff because you're so detailed on all of the individual transactions and just the day-to-day of it. And you're not able to rise up and be like, okay, what's actually happening with our finances? But when you aren't able to do that, what's going to happen is you get stuck into the burden. And what I think actually happens is that either financial leaders in the church are stuck in the burden of the day to day, or they want to pretend like finances don't exist. But in either case, what they're not doing is taking that high level look and saying, okay, where are we going as a church? Where's our mission? Where are we trying to get to? And what do we need to do to do that? So one of the analogies we'll use is like, think about sitting at the wheel of your car. A lot of accounting reports are kind of like looking in the mirror and kind of looking at the dashboard. It just tells you where you have been and how you got to where you are and kind of your overall status. But a lot of times it's kind of in technical language where a CFO mindset is more, let's look through the windshield. We got to take the information of how we got to where we are and where we are. Let's simplify that dashboard and say, okay, what's actually really going to tell us the condition of the car that's going to help us get to where we're trying to go? And then let's look out in the distance through that windshield and say, okay, that's where we're trying to get to. What do we need to do to get there? What do we need to prepare to get there? Because if we're just looking in the past or we're just in the weeds or we're ignoring the condition of the car, well, what's going to happen is we're going to set off on that journey and we might go the wrong way. We might not be prepared. We might, in the idea of a car, like we might not have enough gas to get us to where we need to, or we might need an off-road vehicle when we have, a sports car, those kind of things where we're not really prepared for where we're trying to get to. So that CFO mindset's to lift yourself up and to look further in a higher level and match where we're at with where we're going.
I love that example and that there's an excitement in moving forward, right? And I think that's a part of why pastors get into ministry. It isn't just to sit there and chug along and check all the things. It's to move forward. It's to move the kingdom forward, right?
Yes.
So when we say every dollar on mission, when we're talking about getting to this altitude, it's all in the name of ensuring that the finances of your church are telling the same story that you are aiming for, that kind of end goal on the map. And so how does understanding and telling the story of your finances actually impact your church?
Yeah. So this is the really cool part because when we say less math, more ministry, it's not like your finances go away. They still have to happen. But when they're done right, what it's going to do is it's going to fuel ministry. It's not going to be butting heads. It's not going to be a finance team and a church leadership team that are always fighting or anything like that. But it's all going to be aligned and it's going to be systems at work. And it's also going to fuel how you tell the story about your church and its finances. Now, I had an example of this from when I was an executive pastor. So I remember getting a call and talking to someone who said, "Hey, I'm visiting the church. Just kind of curious about what you all do for your finances, how you operate." It wasn't super probing, but it was just a really good question of just him kind of understanding how do I make sure that if I give to your church, that those dollars are going to be spent well.
Right.
What started
Your
happening
question.
is yeah, they're great questions. Yeah, I appreciated it. And I didn't know who he was. He just had visited a couple times, he said. And what ended up happening is these large checks once a year came, large checks. And later, I pieced together that it was this person
Wow.
without getting into all the details. He only came to the church a couple of times, heard the mission and vision of the church, was excited about what God was doing at our church, and said, I want to give to that. So he called us up and said, basically, he was thinking, is this a good investment? If I give to your church, will these dollars be used for what I hear God is doing through this church? And so he then was ready to give. So that was a combination of us both presenting the mission and vision of the church and making an ask to give, and him responding to that and then saying, hey, do you have the right systems? Are these dollars going to be on mission if I give them to you? Is this a good investment?
Wow.
And so that's where this can actually like fuel incredible things. I mean, his gifts fueled incredible things for what we were able to do as a church
Right.
and for the kingdom that we wouldn't have been able to do. So that's when this gets really exciting.
That's awesome. And what a great example of, yeah, I mean, and he doesn't maybe do what most people, or he did what most people wouldn't necessarily think to do, or maybe consciously ask of like, hey, I want to understand where my money's actually going. I'm sure people have those questions, but he took the time to ask. And then the response that you gave actually promoted him pushing that mission forward. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is for someone that doesn't live in our state, popped by, was in town on business for a couple weekends, and then probably was never going to come back to our church, maybe here and there, but he did it because he was kingdom minded. He loved what he heard, and he was convinced that we would honor with stewardship and with our good systems and finances what he was investing towards.
Awesome. More of that in the future. Am I right? All right, Dan, give it to me straight. What's one key takeaway that every pastor should take from this episode?
Well, we called this less math, more ministry. I would take a few minutes this week to just sit down and say, where are we stuck with more math and less ministry? That might be your budgeting process. It might be confusion. It might be lack of processes. It might be just even like clunky ways you're doing things. It might be because you're ignoring it. And so it's not really more math per se, but it's the less ministry. But where is that happening? Where are those things? And just write it down. Next episode, we're going to actually give you a few practical steps. But once you even have that list, you can listen to more distilled episodes, reach out to Parable, have a conversation with us. Even if we're not the right service team for you to handle your finances, we'd love to have a conversation and just even help get you to the next step with that. So don't do nothing, but just get that list, take a few minutes, think about that, identify a couple of them, and then take steps to just move the needle on those.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dan, and we'll catch you in episode 2.
We'll see you there.
See ya.